Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer Podcast. We have to start off the podcast with the obvious of how does it feel to sit on the side of the couch where Andrew was sitting last time we recorded this?
It feels good.
Yeah?
It feels really good. And because Andrew's not here, I think I might spill some beans.
Spill some tea on Andrew or on Claynosaurz?
Just on Clayno's.
Okay, fair. Andrew, you're safe.
Yeah.
There we go. Dude, how's the LA trip been treating you?
It's been amazing. I am fucking exhausted, but it's been a wild ride. I've done so much this week. But primarily we were there to present at SIGGRAPH, which is the premier computer graphics and entertainment conference. And just to be there as like basically the only Web3 presence there is really special.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that, because you were telling me a little bit about that last night, and I was like, wait, you got to not tell me too much about this because we got to dive into it on the podcast. So first off, like, what was this event? What is the point of it? And kind of tell me more about your involvement with it and everything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously we're a 3D graphics brand, or at least our characters are. There's a lot of tech that goes behind what we do, especially when you're rendering like this many creatures. It's high-end animation. But in order to get that out of the door, we work with a specific render company. In our case, it was Conductor, but Conductor recently got acquired by a company called CoreWeave, which is heavily partnered with NVIDIA. And CoreWeave, in case you don't know, recently just did a $2.3 billion raise. And we have somehow inherited that sort of partnership. And we're still in a really good relationship with this render company, Conductor, but they're now sort of one and the same. For us, it's extremely beneficial, but it just so happens that CoreWeave was presenting at SIGGRAPH. They have a massive booth and presence over there, and they asked 4 people or 4 different companies to present alongside them, partners that they work with or companies that use their render technology. You had a team that does intros for Marvel, and you had a team that does like medical animation, and then there was us, these like goofy, colorful dinos.
Wait, so there were only 4 people presenting and you guys were one of them?
4 different companies presenting at this like huge presence at SIGGRAPH. I was one of them. I was like the Web3 guy, which is a whole different thing. And it was insane because we had Claynos like for the entirety of that of the conference, just like looping on their screens at one of the big companies for SIGGRAPH. Again, with their relationship with NVIDIA, they're heavy hitters. We had the CEO of NVIDIA show up, like I think the second morning. There was like so many people at the booth. It was a wild ride.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So basically, when you were talking to people about Claynosaurz and everything like that, walk me through like what's the pitch? Because obviously, when you're at an event like that, there's all these different people who are they typically working in like what are they working in, like movies typically?
Movies. We had an interesting one that was more or less like a medical company that does like medical animation, like simulations type stuff. But yeah, the other company was definitely movies. A lot of the demographics there are it's either video games or movies or like scientific type stuff. There must have been like the big theme this year was AI. There was a ton of mocap companies. You had NVIDIA presenting all their real-time workflow, which was insane. Some of you might have seen like digital AI influencers. That was like all the rage right now. And but yeah, we were there in an ocean of like high professional companies. Also, in case you don't know, SIGGRAPH is where every year companies like Pixar and Sony and all the high-end 3D animation studios present their new emerging tech, their new workflows and pipeline strategies. That includes Unity, Unreal Engine, it includes Weta. And it's really a place where like you've got this, that everybody sends their best and brightest to go present new technology, and it's sort of like all the industry coming together to talk about new ways of doing things better and faster or whatever. So here we are, like this like Web3 project about these really cool looking colorful dinosaurs, and I'm just there having to present for CoreWeave, and it's insane. And the strategy we had is like, okay, like if we're gonna do this, we're gonna be very kind of strategic in anywhere we use the word NFT. We're going to build a narrative that sort of draws people in before I start sounding crazy. As you know, in the industry right now, you use the word NFTs. They're still unsure. It's very much a gray topic. But if you can start with a hook, and if you can provide validity early on, and eventually you lead into the NFT narrative, you've already hooked them by the time you start talking about it, and you've already provided familiarity. And so it's a lot easier to kind of start talking about what our grand vision is and all that stuff. So we were there sort of like talking about like emerging strategies and in brand development in a new sort of entertainment landscape, or in a more challenging entertainment landscape, which was really poignant because of all like the writers' strikes happening and all that stuff. So everybody already knows that like everything's changing, streaming's changing the game. So that's sort of the narrative we were kind of like going with, is like, okay, here we are finding emerging strategies in IP incubation. We're a 3D project, and we're discovering new ways of doing things in a landscape that's now highly competitive and changing. And then eventually we lead into the whole Web3 and NFT stuff.
So tell me more about that. Like, what is your hook? Like, because I feel like this is something that probably everybody could learn a little bit about. Like, how do you, when you're pitching this to your friends, when you're pitching this to your coworkers, to other talented people that you come across in life, when you bring up NFTs, I'm always curious of how they hook them in like that before dropping the word NFTs, right? Because it's the same thing with like when I'm talking to somebody about my podcast. If I'm like, yeah, I have a podcast about NFTs, they're like, what the fuck?
Have you heard about our Lord and Savior NFTs?
Yeah, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I always kind of lead with like, oh yeah, like I have a podcast about like emerging tech, and they're like, oh, like what is that? What does that mean? And I was like, well, I was like, it's more or less like a big focus of it is digital art, and then I'm like, so I have a bunch of NFT project founders on, right? But I'm like, I gotta at least like kind of digital art. Okay, that's a little bit easier for them to understand and everything. So walk me through when you're talking to people at conferences like that, when you're presenting, like, how is it that you get these people hooked before, telling them basically that it's an NFT project and kind of, because the reaction to that's always going to be a little bit obscure right now. But yeah, tell me more about your pitch with that.
Yeah. And I already showed you the slides, and of course you can share some of them during the podcast because the visuals were a big part of it. But it starts with kind of like setting the tone and kind of like introducing myself as like a valid player and someone that should be here at this conference. So I introduced myself. It's like, yeah, I'm creative director at Claynosaurz. I bring creatures to life for film and television, or at least I used to. And there's all the logos: HBO, Sony, Disney, Warner Brothers, whatever. And then I sort of, give my background. I was an animation supervisor. I've worked on Game of Thrones, Paddington 2, Fantastic Beasts 2, Jurassic Park, all that stuff. And right now you're kind of like, oh, I'm like one of you guys. And they're like, cool. Like, and then I lead into the dinosaurs. We've got the visuals. So then I'm like, but today I'm here to talk about these cute clay dinosaurs behind me. And how a small team of artists, discovered new strategies in IP incubation and wanted to do things differently in a highly competitive entertainment landscape. And I'm going to talk to you guys about that landscape. And then so by that point, it's kind of like the foreplay, and it's stuff that they're sort of like, they might be curious about, but it's like, okay, this is an animation supervisor. We're used to hearing them. The guys from Spider-Verse had just given their big talk. So I go and then the next hook, now that you like, they're listening, is you show them like one of our cinematics. And it very much looks like something you would have seen from any of those other companies. They're like, oh, cool. Like, these are good looking dinosaurs. But then the next slide is the real hook. So we're like, in last November 2022, we sold $1.3 million worth of digital toys and collectibles. And we did that in 2 hours. And then, I paused for a little bit. And then it's like, and then over the next couple of months, we generated $40 million in secondary trading activities for those toys and collectibles. And guess what? We accrued royalties along the way almost every time those collectibles were traded. Now, you can imagine that's a game changer for a lean startup, especially a small team of artists trying to make something for themselves. And that sort of like sets a tone, because you have the same reaction every time, where they might have heard NFTs, they might have heard Web3 or whatever, but here I am, like, very much a familiar face for them, or a presence that they can understand. I'm not talking about NFTs yet. I'm giving them something that's kind of like, I'm setting the tone. And then I hit them with that kind of like, we made X amount in 2 hours and then made this much kind of secondary revenue, blah, blah, blah. And we're just a bunch of artists. And they're like all of a sudden you can see that they sort of kind of like change their mindset and like, okay, hang on, this is like somebody that's very valid, that we can understand. And but I still haven't used the word NFTs. It's still just digital toys and collectibles. And I start with toys before I start with collectibles, because that's really important. Like, digital toys is something that's sort of tangible, then collectibles. And from there, like, then I go back to reality. I talk, not that NFTs aren't reality, but I talk about the history of how, we came up with this brand of characters. We wanted them to appeal to like a 4-quadrant target audience. We wanted, iconic silhouettes, really colorful characters, but we wanted to spice it up with fantasy elements that we grew up with. And then I crack a couple jokes, like, for the nerds out there, we were heavily inspired by World of Warcraft and games like that, and we grew up with Masters of the Universe. So I go back to like familiarity before I really ever mention the word like Web3 or NFTs. I show them some visuals. I'm going through my slides right now because I haven't slept at all. And then the narrative is, okay, so we've come up with this idea for these like awesome, colorful dinosaurs, fantasy elements. We want them to be like, to lend themselves to heavy toyification. So again, they can understand that. And then we have a question as artists trying to build a company. How do we grow that initial idea into a character brand? And how do we do that independently? So now you're telling a story, and it's really important to tell a story. And then I talk about why I'm saying that we want to do this independently. But the first thing is I sort of explain that, what the landscape is today, because the whole spiel is about a changing landscape. I go into the problems with streaming, but I basically talk about something that everybody can understand. So I'm like, there's a scarcity for attention right now. And I'm like, and I know Andrew's talked about this in the last podcast, but I'm like, I'm guilty of it. If you have kids, I'm sure you've seen this, or even yourself, you might be in your living room. Are you able to sit through a movie scene on your TV and not look through your phone, not be a swipe warrior? So not only do you have content, sometimes great content on your TV in front of you, but you're also like, there's a barrage of content on your phone, on your iPad, whatever. So it's coming from all angles. So now that creates an ecosystem where there's like way more competition for eyeballs. That's just like the state of the industry. And also, there's a much deeper desire for user interaction. That comes with TikTok, that comes with Instagram. That's just where we are in the state of the industry right now. And unfortunately, there's a lot less brand loyalty. And that's a really poignant thing for them, because every studio out there is dealing with this. There's no brand loyalty for these new films that are coming out if it's not a sequel. But I also kind of dumb it down for them, where I'm like, okay, there's less brand loyalty. Something will get released on Friday and it feels like it's gone on Sunday. And again, that's pretty poignant for them, where they're like, yeah, I get that. That's what movies feel like. You've got like this big lead up and boom. Maybe not Barbie, maybe not Oppenheimer, but most of the other movies that come out right now, it's like, oh, great. Like, I watched it Friday and I forgot about it by next week. And that's sort of what it is. So now I've kind of explained, okay, here's the state of the industry. And I'm like, okay, well, so the next questions are, how do we retain ownership of our creations as artists? But before I say that, I sort of went on this whole spiel of disintermediation of the middleman, which is essentially like creators are actually a little bit more empowered nowadays via TikTok, via platforms like Instagram, like YouTube, because there's a little bit more fan engagement. There's a globalization or much easier access to IP creation because software costs less, because you can get fan engagement via those social platforms, and you have monetization opportunities. We're even seeing it today on Twitter. Like, you tweet a lot, you get engagement, you can monetize that. But then I sort of kind of explained, however, like you're really trading one gatekeeper for the next. So it sounds great on paper, but the reality is those platforms still take the lion's share of revenue generated by those creators. And again, that sort of continues to set that narrative of like, we got to do something about this. Then I go, okay, well, in light of that, how do we retain ownership? How, as small creators, do we retain ownership of our creations, pure ownership of our assets? But also in that competitive landscape, like, how do we reach thousands of people? How do we use community to amplify the story? And how do we involve and reward that community and those early adopters in a way that lends itself to accruing more brand loyalty? So it's kind of like, the whole story sounds like, okay, like they're onto something and they're presenting all these problems of whatever. And then I talk about the whole Goliath versus the David versus Goliath story, where it's like, well, how do you compete against giants? And you don't necessarily have to, where we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on marketing. We can pioneer new ways to empower creators and audiences alike in this new digital age. And it lends itself to a paradigm shift. And then I'm like, well, that's exactly what we did in 2022. And then I show them the trailer. Again, it's a beautiful little cinematic trailer. They can understand that. And then we go on where I say there was a massive opportunity in blockchain technology, because I've sort of, the narrative was like, okay, competitive landscape, whatever. And then loss of ownership, or like you don't control your assets as a creator. Now, again, everybody in the real world can understand that. All the artists that might not know NFTs or might be against them can also understand that disillusionment. And I'm like, yeah, so there was a massive opportunity in blockchain tech and Web3 and specific use cases in digital collectibles and non-fungible tokens. So I haven't said NFTs. I used the long-term format. And then I kind of pause. I'm like, look, guys, and when I say Web3, it's sort of a blanket statement for the next phase in the internet that relies heavily on blockchain tech for interoperability and self-custody. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, self-custody is, an example is you guys don't own your Gmail account. You especially don't own your Twitter account. And we've seen that today. You've got Twitter creators that had massive accounts, and those have been taken away from them with the rise of X, right? And so everybody in the audience is like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, so that's what Web3 is. So again, you're making it much less alien. You're making it like to a bunch of industry people like, oh, okay, like this is a problem I've been going through, and maybe there's a solution. And here's a guy that's like reputable in the industry that I know. And you're really like turning it all into like basic, relatable English is sort of the strategy here. And again, they've been hooked by the fact that we actually did make money as artists, and that we have a following, whatever. And then we go through our strategies. So we talk about that 5-prong approach where we were going to sell digital collectibles to an extremely engaged audience, produce short form content, show the behind the scenes, whereas most companies don't do that. It's closed curtains, but we show behind the scenes with Easter eggs and all the time in a way to sort of be very transparent, but curate a fan base that's highly engaged by the fact that they're there from the beginning. They see this thing grow. It's their baby as much as it is ours, and it can amplify our story, whatever. So I start deep diving into all the strategies that we devised, and I sort of tell them, I show them the collectibles. They look great. They look like any other companies out there at that event. And then I take them through like, okay, well, in light of those strategies, we thought we were onto something, and we were basically devising a new strategy for a new recipe for IP incubation. and then we really go through that approach. And I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but that's sort of what the presentation was. You tell a story, you hook them, and then you show them how we did it, and you make sure that the story of how we did it is also very relatable to them. And of course it is relatable because the way we approached it is the way we would have approached it in any studio on a technology point of view. And then of course I was there presenting with CoreWeave and with Conductor. So then half the part of the presentation is again something that's highly relatable to them, is like, we had to render 10,000 characters randomly generated. Here's what that code looked like, and here's what the technology behind it is. So, okay, so it feeds everything in a randomizer thing. This is like super nerd stuff. And we were going to render 490,000 frames. We had no idea what we were doing for rendering. We needed help from a company like Conductor. It was a bespoke process. We had our code. They had theirs. The whole thing gets compiled together. You've got thousands of assets that get like collected into one scene file and yada, 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 whatever. And I basically go through, I go from like the NFT kind of narrative to the technology, again, providing even more validity, because like, oh, like these guys, like, okay, they're the real deal. They come from an animation background. This is all like real pipeline workflows. It's highly complex. This is super interesting. And we had so many questions. Like, it was awesome. It was a really special week for us, because I was a little bit worried about being that guy that's like, you know, the odd man out, or like craziness, or like trying to like preach some sort of choir. But the strategy really worked out. And I had a lot of help from Jack, which we've just onboarded. We've been doing a lot of hiring since we last spoke. I think I told you this. Jack is now our, we've hired him as a lead strategist for the company, and he comes from a really strong marketing background. He was a partner at Base Design. You know, we'll be doxing and explaining who he is pretty soon, but that's been really special for us. So I feel like I have like almost like not just a publicist, but someone that can really coach us on strategies, real world strategies on how to sort of marry the Web 2 and Web 3 in a much kind of more complex and cohesive way, in a way that can really target a Web 2 audience and work on our conversion tactics, because that's what it's all about. It's like conversion tactics. We already have Team Web 3 on our side, but to get Team Web 2, it's a whole collection of things.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. I wanted to just let you go there, because I was like, first off, you sold me during that. So I was honestly thinking to myself, okay, if I was sitting there right now listening to this, would I be sold on this presentation? I would 1000% be sold on that, like without a doubt. And so to me, it's like, it's how do you understand their problems, understand their day-to-day and what they're going through, and then how do you come up with solutions that make sense for them in a way that they can digest, right?
Yeah, tell them what their problem is that they already have. They know they have. You know, they're already scared because of the writer's strike and all that stuff, and AI is coming, and oh my God, like, we're fucked kind of theme. But yeah, like you say, you present the problem, then give them a solution. And a solution that all of a sudden doesn't sound crazy, because here are these like familiar faces that have done it in a very politically correct way. I think is something that's strong. If we're gonna get Web 3 in on Web 2 in on this, it's like you need that sense of familiarity. Also, the other thing is, of course, I'm presenting the problems, I'm giving them solutions, but ultimately the hook is the visuals. It's like the art. You've seen our presentation. It looks like candy. It's awesome. It's really pretty. So I was talking, and I could notice every now and then there was, because the way where we're presenting is inside the booth. So a lot of these booths have stages, and you can walk in and hear the speakers and decide to like listen in. You had like these walker-bys. And these are all people that are like, they're interested in learning about like the new graphics cards or GPU systems that NVIDIA is working on, or the new mocap suit that Unity has, or whatever. And you've got like these, basically it's just like nerds everywhere, for lack of a better word. And, you know, there was like kind of like this double take every time they see these kind of like dinosaurs up on the screen, and you'd have people just like wait and look and smile, and it was kind of cool. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you know, on one end, you're talking about these very kind of like poignant themes, but none of it matters if you can't do the most basic thing, which is that image is worth like 1,000 words.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, 100%. Like, I'm excited for people. If you're cool with it, I'll add some of the presentation to this. And
yeah.
I mean, it's like it's very cool to see how you pitch that to people and things like that. What I want to get into is one of the things that you brought up there, and it's something I've thought a lot about is, you know, I'm 30 years old, and like when I grew up, you know, it was like all the big Pixar movies and like all the big animated movies. You know, we all watched like Toy Story. We all watched, you know, even like further back into my childhood, Aladdin and Little Mermaid and all these different things, right? And so, but when I think about movies now, I'm like, I can't remember the last movie that was like a true animated movie that has really caught on and is something that like, even like Avatar, for example, like I don't know if. I don't know because somebody may be like, oh no, there was a ton of young people, but like as a 30-year-old, I remember, you know, people watching Avatar when that was like damn near 10 years ago at this point, right? The original Avatar. And so I think about the majority of people who probably went to the new movie probably were people who grew up watching Avatar 10 years ago, right? Yeah. And so I think about the younger generation, and they have all this content constantly trying to take their attention away, whether they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on IG Reels, they're now on Threads, they're on X, they're on all these different platforms. There's all these different things they're trying to buy for their attention on a regular basis. And so do they actually have any brand loyalty to these animated movies and things like that? Like, I don't know why they would, right? And when I think about it, like when I think about the younger generation and who they have brand loyalty to, it's creators, right? Like at the end of the day, because they've spent the most amount of hours digesting that content and everything like that. So is that a problem that like you know, I don't know the movie industry as well as you do, but like, is that a problem that they've been trying to solve? Is like, how do you get people to genuinely give a shit about these movies that they no longer have the like nostalgia factor that plays a big role in it?
Yeah, and the narrative this year, like I told you, is like the feeling in the industry, and I'm talking about like the content industry, whether it's Hollywood or whatever, is at a very weird place. Like, of course, there's the writer's strike and the actor strike, and in some sense that has to do with AI and whatever, but it has to do with like problems that are happening with streaming. So streaming is a big part of where we are today, as well as like those social platforms. But really, it's been about content for content's sake and an influx of just content coming from like all angles and a loss in quality and all that stuff. And yeah, there's just like nobody has the attention span. So you might have heard of all these movies getting canned this year, like specifically like non-sequel type movies, original things, because it's not worth the risk. I know of a few animation studios that this is like not really announced. I won't mention the movies, but like a few movies that are like basically 85% complete, and it's not worth the trouble to finish it or even attempt to release it.
That's crazy.
Like, so, and because again, they're gonna have to spend the marketing, and even that's not worth it. And so, yeah, it's a big part of the conversation right now. So one of our strategies when we do, and we can talk about this later, because when we do pitches to larger companies, part of our narrative is like that we see where we see Web3 being a really powerful tool to fight against that, or to offer a solution, is a bright future in like audience-driven franchises where creators and audiences are empowered together. There's sort of like an alignment and incentives in a way that's very engaged, in a way that that sort of nurtures brand loyalty. And that's probably where the future is heading. Like a good example actually is Game of Thrones is almost one of those kind of like, maybe not season 8, but but is one of those original like OG audience driven franchises in a way that, or one of the first kind of pilots of that, where yes, it's not the audience that chose things. However, it was like, it's all anyone could talk about when every season was coming out, every episode. They even had this stuff running on big screens at bars or whatever. People will watch it together. And if you can have something like that where everybody's talking about it because they're so engaged, that's really powerful. Obviously you can get some of that from like safe things, Marvel properties. Everybody knows Spider-Man, whatever. But how do you do that for like an original kind of piece of content? And I think the future is in that Web3 incubation process, where it could be Pudgies, it could be us. Hopefully it'll be both, and some others. I can name Azuki's, maybe Doodles as well. Digaz is doing their own thing, but there will be a world in which these brands, and you see the same thing in fashion companies like Kith or whatever. Street brands are really powerful because they're there because normal people made it popular, and normal people find that extremely emotionally powerful for them. Like, I played a part, and I was there when it was nothing, and like I talked to my friends about it, and blah blah. And I think that's what those Web3 companies have going for them. That's what we have going for ourselves, is this narrative of like, hey, like I know the guys that are doing this, and they know me, and I had a say in it, and I have a character from that ecosystem, and they've been taking my feedback, and like I really feel like I was there from the start, and I'm going to the events, and this is like my baby, and maybe a couple years from now it's a million people's baby, but it's kind of like more mine than theirs. There's something really special about that, and you're in doing that, you're also de-risking the whole process, because you're building a product that you can enhance every month. In our case, like every friggin' day or week. But you enhance it as you go, because you're gauging audience reactions, you're gauging how people feel about that, and you're making sure you have to tread lightly, because you can't betray that trust. But you're building a product that feels very, very intimate. I think the word I was looking for is it's got to be an intimate thing for audience members. And I think I go back to Game of Thrones, it felt like an intimate thing at the time. And I think that Web3 incubation tactics are really going to be the future here. And we've had those conversations with studios, and yeah.
I mean, I think you can make foreign concepts feel a lot more familiar just by kind of I guess like when I think about it, I think about Web3, and I think about Claynosaurz, and there's been so many times I've taken out my phone and I've shown people my Claynos, and I'm proud to show them off, right? And then I think about some other like traditional form of content, and I'm like, why would I do that, right? Like I just can't figure out why I would go and do that. And so why would I go and show off some random animated movie that I just so happen to see, unless it's so unbelievably amazing that I feel the need to go and tell everybody? I'm just not going to go and do that, right? But then there are certain franchises like Harry Potter where it's like, yeah, they've captured the nostalgia that I feel, because when I watch that now, or when I play one of the games or do something along those lines, it brings me back to when I was 12 years old reading the books for the first time, right? And so I think it's like that nostalgia factor now is sped up in a way because of the amount of content that we're digesting on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So now I think about the nostalgia of like, hey, we had everything going on with like FTX, and there was all this crazy shit going on in the NFT
nostalgic
world. Yeah, and it is, right?
You had your first podcast with Frank.
Right.
That's nostalgic.
100%.
Like, yeah, it's at the speed of light.
Right. It's this really fast form of like nostalgia, right? And I think it causes you to have this passion that you otherwise wouldn't have for anything else, really, right? And so I think when you can then and I think when you're talking to all these different people at this conference and they're hearing the term NFTs or whatever, I think when they first hear that term, you almost get like this, like there's almost this like little PTSD like cycle that probably like flashes in front of their eyes of like different headlines that probably popped up in 2021 and 2022 that were, oh, this Bored Ape was bought for, $1.5 million. Now it's worth this. Or, oh, this person, this, random music artist created their NFT project and they rugged it. And, Logan Paul did this and yada, 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 right? And all these different like negative headlines popped up. And, and they're like, why the hell would I want to be involved with that, right? And I get that. I get that natural apprehension. But I think then when you explain it the way that you do, they kind of go, okay, maybe there is something more to this. And maybe just the way that it was first shown to me was so much in its infancy that I just didn't really get it, right? And I think that is the beautiful part about NFTs is like, once again, we're so much in the infancy of it that like I understand why people are like, this is stupid. It just doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, okay, but take what you can do with it. Take the fact that now you can create this community where you've got all these people who are super passionate about something that they otherwise would have no reason to be passionate about. If you guys had just decided, you know what, we're just going to go and we're going to create these little animated shorts and put them out on YouTube and just kind of hope they catch some, buzz, right? You'd be basically just hoping for lightning to strike, right? And have some random good luck. And it's like, that is such a pipe dream. But yet what you guys are doing now is now you guys have all these different people who love Claynos, whether they're a holder or not a holder, you know who Claynos are, right? And then as you guys start dripping, Claynos to people in different ways, whether it's the toys and plushies or whether it's the, animated GIFs and things like that, or whether it's, short form content on TikTok. But now you've got people to disseminate that information for you that you otherwise would not have had if it wasn't for the NFT project. It's like, man, that is such a and that's a concept
but that's
they
brand
can understand.
loyalty.
Yeah,
Luca talks about this all the time. Is you're curating an army.
Yeah,
essentially like the best marketing army you can hope for. They're highly engaged. If emotional utility is there for the product, it's a huge win, and they will be your first buyers for the toys and for the physical collectibles, and they will be your first buyers for new strategies that you're piloting. And now you get those metrics on paper, and you can present those metrics to the big picture, which is Web 2, and it then becomes very interesting. I mean, ever since our mint, in light of the success that we had, we've had a seat at the table, at a table in which we wouldn't have had that seat were it not for being able to monetize early on in that development cycle. Otherwise, like you say, it would have been a shot in the dark to success, which is basically the traditional Web 2 incubation process. Is I hope for the best. Sure, my characters are great. They're deeply inspired. People like them, but it doesn't mean that much. But all of a sudden, I've been able to monetize them, and now you've got studios that are like, oh, okay, like tell me more, because money talks, obviously. But of course, yeah, you have your marketing army.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like when you think about like a company like Kickstarter, right? It's like a company like that works where somebody takes this, I have this idea, I have this thing I want to do. We basically need capital in order to scale this and to, produce the product, yada, yada, yada. This is what you're going to receive by being early, right? And that works really well. And there's a lot of businesses that get funded that way and everything like that. But you don't have any interest in their long-term success. And that is the biggest flaw with it, is that
you just want the MVP.
Right. You're just that's what you're getting, and that's great. But, are you, if that product ends up becoming a massive product down the road, do you really get anything as a result? Not really. Even though you were extremely early, there's really no benefit there. Right?
You aren't even, I mean, if they're making a short film or whatever, like if they're deving some new speaker, maybe you get some recognition for it. I've done like Indiegogo and Kickstarter as a buyer. But yeah, like you don't really get any true acknowledgement and recognition for being an early supporter.
Or any upside, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the thing with NFTs is like, once again, all of us are.
You're a part of the family.
Yeah, you're part of the family. You have the ability to be part of the long-term growth of it. And if it does become this massive thing, then you have the ability to financially benefit from that.
Yeah.
Or to, depending on the project and depending on what the rules of their IP are, you have the ability to create your own products under that IP and then monetize off that. Like, there's so many different things that you can do that you otherwise just would not have the ability to do. And I think, once again, when you explain this in the way of like, hey, there are, explain this in the sense to other people that have worked in traditional methods, hey, here are some problems that I know that you're dealing with on a regular basis, and here's a way that NFTs could potentially solve that. It's like you make it a no-brainer for them, and I think that's where we can start to rationalize and make people understand this space, and so that it's not this like, taboo word. It's like they just need to hear exactly the pitch that you just did, hear podcast conversations like this, and then you can understand it a bit more.
You heard it here first.
Facts. So here's what I want to get into real quick from there. In the time since you last came on the podcast, which was back in, I believe, March, something along those lines.
Yeah.
You guys have hired quite a few people since then. You mentioned one of them a second ago. So can you walk me through who are some of the recent people that you guys have hired? What was kind of the goal of these hires, and how's it all been going?
Okay, yeah, it's a lot. On the production side of things, we've hired a producer. That's Sebastian. He actually comes from an animation background, but is now on the production side of things. that provides structure. The more digital artists you're working with from different departments and whatever, the more you have to solve for structure. Otherwise, you're just throwing money away. You're wasting so much time, and everything has to be cohesive for everybody. So what Seb would do is solve for communication, track how much everything is going to cost. If we're making a short film, we're making a cinematic, whatever, you need to break that down. It's like doing the real thing on set, or you have a photo shoot, you got to track, okay, this is how much this is going to cost, the lens, whatever, the light setup. So he'll do the same thing. So basically when we pitch an idea, he'll track, okay, here's how many people we need to complete it based on the people that we have available or that are already working X amount of hours on that project. We actually need to hire more people, blah, blah, blah. So it's a bespoke tracking system in the form of a talented human. On the marketing side of things, we had picked up a few people to help out. Ashton's been involved. But on the Web 2 marketing side of things, like I talked about, we needed a real strategist, someone that's a boss and that has done this for real and that has worked with these large companies, that has done pitches for, you name it, like Gucci and stuff like that. Like, and we finally found that. And I'm not going to fully dox exactly who it is yet, but we're going to be open about it. We announced some of our advisors. We'll continue to announce our advisors, but the first one we had announced it was Gaetano, who was the ex-president for the Americas of Rovio. And the thing about advisors is these are not like, you have two kinds of advisors in the Web3 space. You have like a advisor that helps you through Mint. We had amazing advisors for that, but we had like a whole team of Web3 advisors. We had talked to tons of project founders, all that stuff, or people that are good at, the crypto Twitter ecosystem, or could warn us, here's what to expect during a mint. Here's how you make sure you don't fuck anybody like after the mint and whatever, right? So, but those are Web3 advisors. Their job is to understand the ecosystem and help you navigate those waters. We also needed people that could help us navigate the waters that we may not understand. One of that was branding and branding strategy and distribution and licensing. And that's what Gaetano does for us. And to have someone like that say yes to our project, we had basically met and recruited him maybe the day after your podcast, where Andrew and Sasha had lunch with him. And the amazing thing is I don't know how much more obvious I can tell you guys, but for those sort of high profile figures to look at these dinosaurs and not much else, like we give them some metrics, but usually it's like, look at this, what do you think? And they're like, my kids would fucking love this. Or like, these look great. And okay, tell me more. Let's have a lunch meeting. It says a lot about the product that we're developing. Like we're extremely confident. And I know that there's a lot of noise in Web3 and whatever, but we're always like kind of, we're laser focused and we think of the big picture, and it's not always easy to do because again, there's noise left and right. And of course we're very kind of like conscious of holders. But no matter what, it's like, we got to stick to our guns and make sure that we succeed in the North Star, which is extreme familiarity with the characters and successful new Web3 strategies, which we can go over later because I went on another one of my tangents, which I do all the time. But hires. So that was one of our advisors. We've got another one that was actually head of investment for all of BMO Bank, where we do everything professionally. We make sure that we're covered on legal, on taxes. Deloitte is actually our tax office. So we get a lot of advice for Web 2, and we're always looking for more. We call them, they don't have to be gray haired, but the term gray, I learned this from Andrew. I learned a lot of things from Andrew. A gray hair advisor is usually someone that's either retired or has the ability to, on their spare time, using their track record and their Rolodex, help another company out and get skin in the game. So that's the case. And then for the art side of things, oh my God, we've hired now 23 freelance animators, 2 of which we've now hired like full time on salary. We're doing that slowly because we don't have all the money in the world. And these sort of artists cost a lot. So we're handpicking the right fits. But for the most part, there's an army of, I'll say it like it is. It's a lot of friends that after we had our first success called us and said, okay, like if you need help, we'll help you guys, which has been an amazing thing. Because a lot of them have agreed to do it on a slightly more discounted model for us, where they're like, man, you guys did it, like take it home and like we'll help you. So that's been really special. So we have 23 artists that are helping us on the animation side of things. We started a recruitment phase on LinkedIn. Like we're doing it. I mean, we're building our own little Web3 studio, right? And so now we asked to do, in order to complete all the things that we want to do on time, which is either TikTok short form content or cinematics that kind of explain the bigger picture and the lore and make you fall in love with these characters. We need specific artists in specific departments. So now we're hiring a big push for what we call lighting and compositing artists. That's what Will does. If you guys are following William on Twitter, he's our lead and supervisor for that. And he's been going through tons of applications. Like we're talking about Web 2 applications. So we did our first kind of call to action on LinkedIn, and we've got like 50 emails of applications from, we're talking about like, real studio 3D lighters, 3D compositors, all that stuff, which is amazing. Again, it speaks for the product. It's been super positive. Like, I really want to work on this. These make me laugh. They're really cute. And I have time on my hands. I can help you guys. Half of them are people that are already working somewhere and would like to do this on freelance. And the other half is people that are willing to do this full time. So it's a good mix of both. And for us, that's great because we don't necessarily want everybody doing this full time, for financial reasons for sure. But also, you don't want to, too much overhead. And that can happen when you're in a production environment, whether it's someone on set sitting on his ass because he's waiting for the shoot to start or whatever. In our case, it's like, well, the animators are animating the characters. They're moving them. They're not ready to get started in the other departments yet. And if you're paying those other departments full time, it's just money.
It
down
adds
the drain.
up, yeah.
Yeah. Who else? So yeah. Yes. Okay. So we're working with people like now for animation. We already have Mina as head of animation. Again, he was a supervisor on Spider-Man, things like that. But we also have Sebastian Bruno that's starting to help out. And Sebastian, also a really big player in feature film. He's worked at DreamWorks. He's worked at Sony. For the last couple of years, he was and is an animation supervisor for Real Effects. He's supervised stuff like Captain Underpants, most recently Monkey King for Netflix, a whole bunch of stuff. He's extremely well connected, super, super talented. So he's come on to help Mina. So now we have 2 guys that are running the show for animation, which is great for me because I don't have to do any of that anymore. Thank God. What else? Who else? There's like so many people. For me, it's been like a fever dream. Yeah. Oh, yes. Actually, we just hired an old colleague and friend of mine. I won't dox him yet. He's a supervisor at DreamWorks. So he just wrapped on Kraken. Before that, he did Ugly Dolls, and he did oh my God, why am I forgetting the name? The one with the baby, Boss Baby.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And what he's doing is he for DreamWorks, he actually develops and creates the guidelines for the characters. It's kind of like when you're incubating an IP at those studios, you're like, okay, here's how the characters are going to look like. Here's what poses they can hit, all that stuff. And we had somebody in-house doing that, but he literally does this on a high level to pitch these projects to the producers. And that's what he's doing for us right now, is going with all the character like brand guidelines, building that for us, all those sort of notes, so that we can take that and have like a very cohesive IP pitch deck when it's time to permeate past whatever it is that we're doing short term.
There we go. There we go. So walk me through, like, what is, obviously when you're hiring these people, what is like the main goal when you're bringing them on? Is it for them to work on a lot of the short form content that you guys are doing? Is that for like social media in terms of TikTok and IG Reels and YouTube? And like, what is your, like, I guess, what is your strategy with these new hires in terms of like, what do you want them to bring to the table and help in the next phase of Claynosaurz?
All of it. So it's all the verticals all at once. And what that is, you've got, so we split it up into basically two primary things. You've got cinematics and trailers. That's like hyper high quality. It's kind of like the Dactyl clip that we released after, or at the party that night after our podcast. But these are like, it can be like a minute and a half. They can be 30 seconds, but however you spin it, they tell a story. It's like a short story, and it's extremely high quality. And then we've got TikTok and IG Shorts. So those are two completely different verticals. It's not that the TikTok quality is bad. It just doesn't have to be as intense as the cinematics. So based on the skill set of the animator that's going to work with us, we put them in either or. And sometimes it could be, a top level senior animator, and it's someone that comes up to us and like, hey, I don't have time to do the cinematic stuff, but I can help you guys with like the TikTok stuff. Like I can just do a few TikTok shorts for you guys. We're talking about like anywhere between like a 6 to 11 second short. And the way we've built that out is we have like specific price points for TikTok where it's like, it's a pay per shot model. So it's like, okay, if you do a TikTok shot, you get paid X amount for that shot. And we're going to be very conscious of not giving you a lot of notes. And because the quality doesn't have to be insane. If you're going to work on cinematics, we talk about your actual rate and we pay you the hourly fee, because then there's a lot of back and forth, and then we curate the whole thing and whatever. And it just makes more sense that way. But it allows us to pick and choose who's going to work on TikTok. And we basically split the team that way. But the short answer is they're working. There's multiple people working on multiple different things at the same time. And it's split either based on availability or skill set.
Very cool. Very cool. So one of the things we talked about last night is the GIFs, right? And Pudgy Penguins has done a great job of, I've had people that I've been texting and they've randomly sent me like a Pudgy Penguins GIF without even knowing what Pudgy Penguins is, right? And to me, that's one of the coolest ways that you can start to drip these things into people, is by them just seeing it and it becoming more normal to them. So then if they end up seeing it in another format, then it becomes, it just more and more retention points, right? So for you guys, like, where are we at with GIFs? Like, when can we expect Claynosaurz GIFs? And, and walk me through if there's anything that you can tell me about the process of, like, how do you get Claynosaurz GIFs to just randomly show up in the different GIF formats when people are utilizing them?
Yeah, some of them already do show up, not all of them. What we have is we started Tenor and Giphy. Those are like the two primary websites that automate that process. That's what Pudgy's uses, and the other projects that are doing it. But if you have like a creator status or like a company page, it's got to get verified. And a part of the verification process involves having the finished website, not just a landing page. So that would be our first hurdle. So what we're doing is right now we're building out like those GIFs and not publicizing all of them in order to just wait for the time where where we get that tick box. And I can go over the website stuff in a bit, but that's a part of the process. And once we have those accounts verified, then we go to town. And we're really confident. It's like, I know there's a lot of like FOMO internally for sure, because of course, like how can you not, like, it's not that you're stressed, but you want to get it over with. And I'm sure that all of the fans do and all the collectors do. But we're also really confident in what these things look like. So whether it's now or we have to wait till that, mid-October release for the website, it's not the end of the world.
Fair. Yeah. Okay, so here's, I just looked it up on my phone. I was like, I got to make sure I get this right. So my next question for you is about the Claynosaurz game that you guys did with Octo. And so what was the goal of that? How did that play out in terms of what your expectations with it? And are there going to be things like that in the future? Kind of walk me through that.
Are there going to be things like that in the future? I don't know. Like we're more and more we're being extremely cautious with the partnerships that we strike, just to make sure that everything is sort of on brand and cohesive. For Octo, it was an amazing opportunity. The whole thing was sponsored. They wanted visibility for themselves, and we were like, well, look, this is a great way to accrue familiarity. We were working with them to make sure that like most of the art direction was respected. They did a great job. And actually, I was surprised with how many people played it and liked it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I play that shit all the time.
But a minigame is awesome. So that's really cool. And I think Andrew was big on that because in his eyes, it was like, well, look, it's a very simplistic, fun mobile game, and it's got tokenization and Web3 elements to it, but primarily it goes on the App Store, and that's important. As long as it doesn't like sort of take away from the brand or whatever. So that was really like the ethos behind it, is let's give holders some fun kind of utility. Let's also continue to always be active and doing something. Like hopefully if you've been paying attention, like it's very rare that we've had a quiet 2 weeks since mint. Like, I mean, we're releasing stuff left and right. And it's a part of it. It's you gotta grab that sort of engagement and not lose that chokehold on engagement. And a part of that is to constantly release products, but you also have to be really careful without and make sure that you don't release like shit projects or products.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was something that when I saw it, I was like, the fact that they didn't go and like develop their own game. They worked with a company that already has created games like this. I was like, I like to know that, because sometimes, there are like gaming companies, and I was like, I don't think that's obviously what Claynosaurz is doing. Like, you guys are doing a lot of other stuff. And I was like, so the fact that they didn't go and like overinvest too much time into this. They worked with the company. They came out with a fun mini game, and like this was something I thoroughly enjoyed. And then you started seeing people posting about it on social and everything like that. And it's like that's a cool way to keep the community engaged, to give them something fun. And I mean, I loved every bit of it. Like I truly, like, there were so many times I was.
Are you good at it?
Good is relative, right? Like, I think my high score is something around like 3,000, something along those lines. I feel like if I remember the scoring correctly, it gets hard. It gets really fast. Right? So I have to be super concentrated. And so, there'd be so many times at night I'd be like, all right, like, I'm going to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to go sit on my couch. And I'm going to play this goddamn game. And it's so fun. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was cool again to see, how does the IP work in a format like that? And it was really cool to see that it translated over really well, and it was fun. And it's just another way to obviously grow the IP and things like that. But so where I wanted to pivot to from there is obviously there's content that comes along with that, right? Like, you have a lot of community members who can go and make a video showing themselves playing the game, things like that. That's always cool. And I wanted to get into kind of community-generated content. And so one of the things that I saw recently was and I wanted to make sure I get it right, is the Cleanupedia that Buzz put together.
Oh, yeah, today.
Yeah. Super, super cool. So that, for people who, if they haven't seen it yet, it is essentially a encyclopedia of Claynosaurz that Buzz put together. And so if you have any question about Claynosaurz, it essentially answers that question for you.
Finally.
It is incredibly well done, and was something that, like, I went and I was like, man, there are things that I'm even learning from this, because I don't have all the time in the world to just be spending in Discord and things like that. And so it was a quick way for me to get caught up, and I loved it. So walk me through, like, was that something that you guys wanted Buzz to create, or was that something that he did on his own? Walk me through that, because to me, the part that's interesting to me is, like, goes back to our earlier part of the conversation of having all these people who are super, super passionate about what you're doing. And now something like this gets created, which helps to simplify the message for, now when people ask you guys questions, it's something that you can easily point to. And so it makes your life easier. You don't have to go and keep answering the same questions. And at the same time, it also, a community member, is, you guys, talked about on there that he was the one who created it and everything like that, which allows him to get the shine that he deserves. So walk me through that.
I mean, UGC is incredible. It's like, you put it out into the world, and then it takes on this organic life for itself through the eyes of collectors, of fans, of audience members. And that has been probably one of the best part of all this is seeing people make it their own, but seeing also it's not just user generated content is not just like visuals. It's articles. It's these sort of like a whole GitHub wiki that you can go through and understand our ecosystem. So yes, a Buzz definitely pitched it, but we had so many meetings recently. The reality of it is in our kind of thirst for newness and for kind of piloting new strategies. Part of that included the cupcake drops, and some of like our IP expansion tactics, which was that itemization play. We realized that it's like, look, while the website is still in development, there's a lot of questions. There's unclarity. There's like confusion over the way the itemization works, the way those exclusive drops work, and yes, there's a lot of collections on if you go on Tensor or Magic Eden, and we had to solve for that, or at least in a temporary way until the website solves for all of it, which it really will. And so that was a big part of it. So we had like just like 911 chats all the time. Okay, like we got to get this out there, have some visuals and all that stuff, and Buzz's GitHub is definitely a big part of that.
Okay, so you've mentioned now the website a few times. So, and you told me that you told me that you guys are working with a new branding studio on the website and a few other things, right? So what can you tell me about the branding studio? What can you tell me about what they're working on? What can you tell me about the website? Walk me through all of it.
Okay, this is, I'm really stoked about this. So part of the reason the website has been delayed over and over again, and I know guys, like I've heard it all, but you guys, please understand that when we don't release something, there are many things happening. One of the things in the space that by now you might be used to is there's a dissonance between expectations and actual releases, and we are not that company. Like we would rather, delay something and make sure that it is of AAA quality in our attempt to tap into the Web2 ecosystem as well. And a part of that, unfortunately, has been the website. We went through multiple iterations internally, and a website, I'll be super transparent about this, because not everybody knows this, is extremely expensive to take from start to finish, anywhere between $25,000 to $60,000, like sometimes even more. And in light of that, it would be a mistake to do something that you're going to throw away just to buy yourself time. So some of our solutions are Buzz's GitHub to solve for like some information kind of holes or gaps that we have. But the website's been in development, and the story there is, we went through a few designers. We went through the multiple iterations. Sometime at first it was simplistic. Then we realized, okay, it's not what we want. Then it was more of like a Web3 focused website. We realized we can't do that. Like our plan is to make a AAA looking website, that would give you the same feeling of like you go on the Valorant Riot Games website and you're like, wow, like that's cool. That's like an IP. And it's a website that sort of like is very catered towards a Web2 audience, and they don't know that it's in fact an NFT kind of hub. And it would be, it's all about the characters that just so happen to have a stream of collectibles in there and a whole spiel about community, but it's not the whole Web3 play. Like you look at, and I'm not trying to throw shade, but you go on the Azuki website as a Web2 person, and it is very much a Web3 website. Like it's a hard website to understand if you don't know it. And for us, it was like, we can't do that. We have to do a website where mom and pop and everybody goes there and they get it and they love it. And eventually they're like, hold up, like what are all these items that are kind of like that lend themselves to the characters and whatever, and it's part of the lore and whatever. So the whole thing is gonna be really cohesive. And we're targeting that there's a lot of things we're releasing for Breakpoint. Breakpoint's going to be a big one for us. So that's basically Halloween / early November. We're going to pilot a few, the main cinematic. We're going to pilot the website, a few activations. It's a really big milestone for us. So the website is there, as well as branding. Now, the website today is extremely dependent on branding, again, because we're putting in so much money into this thing. And we've recently signed with a incredible branding studio. If you guys don't know what what a branding company does, I know like Phantom just went through it. I think Monkey Now as well. But a branding studio, essentially, they look at the big picture. They look at what your North Star is in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years. Like, who are you as a company? What's your identity? What demographic are you trying to tap into? They take all of that and they package it into voice, visual identity that permeates across your entire ecosystem, whether it's toy packaging, whether it's the words we use and don't use in Web 2, whether it's the words we use and don't use in Web 3. It's literally everything, from type font, logos, whatever, but it really is deeper things. It's ethos. It's it's literally everything, so that all of it becomes extremely cohesive, and it's a pretty intense investment. However, for us, it's definitely worth it, again, because that is who we are. The visual hook is our biggest kind of weapon here. And this branding office is Kodo Studios. We had interviewed alongside Jack, who brought all these amazing players to the table. We had interviewed tons of branding offices, and a lot of them, were bidding for this project. We were actually blown away by the reception and the amount of high-end branding studios that wanted to work on this thing. But Kodo, I am so excited about, because even the web designers we were originally like working with, kind of like heard like, wait, like those guys want to work with you? Like, that's so dope. These guys are legendary in the design world. They win awards. They've done branding for Netflix, for WhatsApp, Uber. Here, I have a list here. It's insane. I'm going to go through it really quick. Peloton, Spotify, Fiverr, PayPal, Airbnb, Venmo, Washington Post, Google. And every now and then, they like to work on a smaller account. I say smaller because those companies obviously probably cost millions of dollars to brand. We are not there yet. But they like to work on a smaller account every now and then because it's a lot more creatively enticing for them. And so we had like the most amazing meetings with them. We're there in a room. They're there. The whole conference room thing is very exciting, and they just sell you the dream. And they're just like, and we've been through that with other branding offices, but they just crushed it. And they were just like, here's what we see and where this could be. And we understand what you guys are trying to do for Web3. And it might not be next year, but it sure as shit will probably be in the next 2-3 years. And let us be a part of this. And here's the vision and whatever. And we're like, take it home.
That's dope.
Take our money.
That's very
yeah. Cool. So we're super stoked about that. And of course that lends itself to the website. So now it's just like this friggin' sprint for them to give us the minimum viable version of the branding package, to then inform certain design elements. We already have a wireframe for the website, but to then rehash that to make it all like work together with where they're taking the brand.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So, okay, so then fast forward like a year, what will they have? Like, if someone's a community member and they're looking at different things, like obviously the website we just mentioned, what are other aspects that community members will start to see the, this brand studio effect on the Claynosaurz project?
On the Web 2 side of things, definitely like copywriting, like the way we speak. I'm not talking about like myself. It's just like whatever is written on the website, whatever is written on our packaging, like the sort of the humor, the whatever. It's like really the language of the company. Definitely the different permutations of the logo and the different fonts, all of that stuff being completely custom from the ground up. The colors we're using in packaging, the different styles of packaging, merch, you name it. It's like, it's everything. It's a whole package. It's very much the visual identity of the company above all else, but in a way that makes it highly, highly recognizable. And so, but that's also that it could be everything. It could also be like specific emoticons. Like it's just like, it's a very, very like airtight package of like anybody that we would hire whether it's a graphic designer or whatever, would go through that whole package and be like, I have 0 questions. Like, you need a packaging? Yeah, great. I'll do the package for this like new version of the T-Rex or whatever.
Man, I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Dude, for me, it's like I knew we could get there one day, but it's so exciting. It's so exciting when you're in those meetings, and they're excited too. And it's like, yo, these are the guys that do branding for like Netflix and WhatsApp and all those other companies. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, and for people who are, if you're sitting at home and you don't understand like how incredible some of that stuff is, it's a lot of like, when I think about branding, I think about like the subliminal like messaging that you get from certain apps that you open up or certain websites that you go to.
How do you feel when you see it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah.
And it's the way that it really sells it to you, right? And same thing when you open up a package from something, when you look at the branding on the, outside of the box of the Pudgy that you just got, or, the plushie toy or whatever. It's like all those different things speak to you and make you feel, they elicit some sort of emotion in you, right? And so there's something about that, and if it's done really well, it has a huge power and a huge effect on you. And when it's not done as well, you just don't get that sort of feeling, right?
It's extremely complex. Like, everything they pitch has some sort of background story or psychological kind of reasoning behind it. Even the space between letters, it all has, like, nothing is left to chance or nothing is an accident.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm so stoked to cross that sort of next step for us.
This is the sort of stuff that we could nerd out for forever.
Yeah, I know.
I know, but I'm like, I know we got to keep it moving today because we got a time limit. But so the next thing I want to get into from there is merch. So walk me through, what is the latest update with merch, with plushies, with figurines and everything like that. What are you guys working on? Where are we at with it? How close? How soon can I have a little Clayno plushie that I can have chilling on the couch?
Plushies.
I need to know. Soon.
Yeah, plushies real soon. Okay, so I'll go clothing really fast. Clothing is a little bit of a complicated one. It's very similar to the website in that, we've been going back and forth in what our visual languages for that stuff, branding, whatever. And why should we do clothing? Is that who we are? And we will, because I think it's exciting for the holders, but we got to be really careful in how we do it. So there's a ton of back and forth. It's got to be creative. It can't just be boring, whatever. We'll get there. And, again, Coda will help us with this. We're also working with Top Drawer. If you know who they are, also a big deal. But for the plushies, super stoked about the plushies. So we started working on the plushies basically the week after we had our first podcast. In LA, Andrew and I had a lunch with Natalie and Bart from Toy Makers. They have a ton of experience in plushies and toy making, years and years and years. I think it's like 15 years, and they've exited off 2 companies. One of them was like a baby brand, and they've a lot of contacts. And so they're sort of running that project for us. It has been an incredible experience. I've learned a lot. There's so much back and forth and I'm sure maybe Luca's talked about this, but I'm sure he's felt it. Like, the amount of iterations you go through when you're making a toy, and especially when you're making a plushie, because keeping a plushie on model and recognizable as the character is an absolute nightmare. And that's nothing about the factory. It's really just like, it's a squishy kind of like malleable thing. It's not easy to build. So you go through multiple iterations, and in mid-fall, it's probably around like, I would say like end of September, October-ish. Again, a lot of things lead up to Breakpoint. We're going to have a run of plushies, and it'll start with 3 species. And each of those species will have different permutations and color patterns and all that fun stuff, different rarities. They look really good. I'm going to show you some.
Oh, yeah,
you'll be able to post these. I've actually posted tons of like sneak peeks. I get slapped on the wrist all the time, but it's part of it. Yeah, so we're going to be releasing these guys. They're almost finished. They're not quite finished, but I think you might have seen some of these. The factory that is building these plushies is Gund. If nobody knows here, and you can put the logo after, Gund is like a legendary plushie maker. They make pushing, but they also for years and years and years have made top tier plushies. I think they're on the level of like Jellycat. And again, for us, our big ethos is like AAA quality in almost everything we do. So these are really, really high-end plushies. And of course, they're going to lead back to the digital in a special way. So it'll be, I think it's a run of, is it 10? I think it's 10,000 that we're going to release. And within that run, there's different tiers of rarity with a select set amount of each. So obviously the less rare has a lot more of that colorway, but if you want to get the, they don't all have the same amount, so you might miss out on a color. But
okay,
it is what it is, right?
He's
it's a part of the fun.
He's dropping a little alpha.
And then no, go for it, and then I'll go through the other stuff.
I mean, these are just so cool. I mean, like they really are like just. They look just
Claynos.
so, I just want to play with it. Like, I just want to, I look forward to being able to, one of my buddies, one of my best friends, his wife is pregnant currently, and I'm like looking forward to being able to give his son one of these.
They're so
right?
soft too.
Yeah, they're
so soft.
Man, I love it. I truly love it. And it's like, that's the sort of thing that just gets me really excited about like where you guys are taking things, because when I think again about like, the term on board, all that shit, is so annoying, and I know it, and I know it's something that we all like hate talking about from time to time, because it just becomes almost like a word that truly has no meaning. Like, how do we onboard the masses? How do we bridge Web 2 and Web 3? But it's like that sort of stuff really does do it, right? And like I could easily see something like that being sold in a Target or in a Walmart or in a on Amazon and all these different platforms.
It's funny you say Walmart. We're really careful about that. I mean, like where we sell those plushies will be pretty important. But for us, our approach is, our strategy is not being very aggressive with the go-to-market. As you guys have known, it's like we're not the quickest to release products, but the products that we do release slap really hard. I've been super into like the David Horvath podcast. He's the creator of Ugly Dolls, and they've been really, they're an evergreen IP for the longest time. And he's a producer at Nickelodeon. And, more and more what I've been thinking about is like, he says this all the time, but the right kind of small is huge. So you need to make sure that it's a quality product that people are going to want, that is going to help the IP, and is not going to lend itself to being very early, finding yourself early at the discount basket in Walmart. And that's something we're very, very careful about, which is why we don't want to do a massive run right away. I think that once we have enough leverage, once people know the brand a lot more, for sure we're going to start getting aggressive. But we're so careful about like just going hard real fast. Like, that does not sound good. But
yeah, no, I mean, you definitely do have to worry about that, and it's definitely something where I think the cool part about your guys' IP is that I think if it's done right, it can really end up in so many different places. Like, we've recently started doing these like Top Golf meetups, and like in that when you're at Top Golf, like one of the mini games they have is like Angry Birds, right? And like when I've been playing that, like playing the little Angry Birds game while you're playing Top Golf, I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, like, there could be some way that Claynosaurz is used in this. Like it makes so much sense. And like when you look at the IP and when you look at the actual the NFTs and the dinosaurs and you look at everything, it's like, man, it's so obvious. Like it's going to be so obvious. And that's the part that's so exciting to me is like, again, like as a holder, I get excitement talking about it. Right.
Yeah.
And then I know that as you start to, start to bring people in, whether they're somebody who has the plushie and it's a, sort of a limited edition at the beginning. And, and are you guys working on like figurines or like, what do you guys, tell me some of the other things that you guys are working on.
Yeah. So we're looking for the right partner for like the more mass market type figurines. And, we've had a lot of conversations. Saying no is really hard, but necessary. You don't want to, as exciting as the opportunity might be, like sometimes it's just not the right play for now. As far as vinyls are concerned, we're deving the first like high-end collectible vinyl. We're probably getting the prototype end of next week or like a week and a half from now. Like we've seen the pictures, it's painted, it's finished, all that fun stuff. I can tell you, again, I've shown some sneak peeks online. It's going to be a toxic red T-Rex. And that the box is going to be pretty insane. But that is going to be the first ever like limited edition high-end collectible Rex. It's going to be a super limited run. We're circling, I think, between a run of 3 and 500. And that's going to be held a little bit as, for now, tentatively, a little bit like a mint, where it's like you buy it and either, you know, you get it or you don't. You maybe have to be quick there. But yeah, I'm super stoked about that because, one, getting to see it in 3D in real life is just awesome. And you're like, man, like it's a Clayno. It's wicked. So we're doing that. But eventually, 100%, we're doing figurines. Again, it's just, when is the right time to do it?
Yeah.
Is what we're always kind of like being really careful with.
100%. So, okay, so I have a few more questions.
It's fine, man.
So
I told John to wait up.
There we go.
I'm gonna go eat with John Lay and
meeting up with the legend John
grub.
Lay.
Yeah.
Love it. Tell John when you get dinner with him that I need to get dinner with him soon. It is long overdue for us to get together. But
you wanna come?
No, I need to get work done. I'm so tired too. This, for everybody who is watching this right now, we're recording this the day after everything went down with D-God. So the infamous August 9th date, we're recording this the day after. So
yeah, both me. I showed up at Marc's place and we've been texting all day, and I'm just like, dude, I'm so tired. I want to cry. Like, it's so bad. And Marc's just been getting hammered.
Oh my God.
Like,
we were at dinner last night, and I was just showing him all the text messages that I was getting, and it was like one after another, and I was like, man, this is whew. Yeah. I am tired. So I can't wait to go to bed tonight. But with that said, so a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is expensive, right? Expensive to have this, to work with this branding studio, expensive to hire these people on so that you guys continue to put out more content and everything like that on different social platforms and things like that. So everything that you guys are doing is a high cost kind of business. And so what are you guys doing in terms of like VC funding? Are you guys looking into VC funding? Give me an update on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we are. I think Andrew spoke about this on Discord and in a few channels. We are fundraising, and we're making sure that we curate the right investor. And it's going very well. I've just kind of finished my sort of like whatever you call it, like roadshow of pitching with Andrew. But watching Andrew do this stuff is impressive, like really impressive. So what we're looking for is a highly strategic partner for our first round of investment. Someone that'll basically say, like, we see what you guys are doing. Here's some money. Take it home. And we believe that we found that someone that believes in what we're doing with Web3, but also has a big presence in Web2 that was important to us, and is a little bit less like pure VC. Someone that historically has not exited often, and that was important to us, and someone that has all the right contacts in the film industry and what have you. So yeah, we're doing the fundraise, and knock on wood, it's going well. Hopefully that happens really soon. And it's not that we need the runway right away, like today or tomorrow. Like, we're fine for the foreseeable future, but it definitely helps make everyone feel safer and give us the confidence to really get aggressive with a few strategies. It helps to onboard more people full time that might be a little bit worried, like, can we really do this? Is the real thing? Traditionally for artists, it's a lot to ask them to sort of to kind of like forget their opportunity cost of like leaving Disney in this ecosystem with all the like kind of weird AI things coming our way. It's a tough ask. And I would like to have a much larger full-time team than what we currently have. So that's a big part of it. And like you say, a lot of these things is high cost. Brand development, animation, all that stuff. You got to invest to grow. That's just how it is. And I think in Web3, there's maybe a misunderstanding of how fast that's supposed to happen, of how to expand and whatever. But it's like, one, it does not happen overnight, and yes, like, it takes a lot of money to incubate and grow a company in a sustainable way. It's not something you could just like say like, hey, like, give me like $5 million and now we're a company. It doesn't work that way. It's like, you need to have a plan. You need to hedge your bets, make sure that like you know exactly what this looks like in the next X amount of years. And but that's where we're at. So I'm really stoked. We're also talking with studios that could potentially co-produce episodic. So I have a story there. I don't even know if we have time for it, but I did tell you that there was like some cool thing in New York, right? Like,
Yeah, tell me.
yeah.
Tell me.
Okay. So at our New York party, which happened after our first podcast, we had like, I think on paper it was like 847 attendees, something like that, at the New York event. It was insane. It was like one of the biggest parties there, bigger than most Ethereum parties. It was a wild success. It was just a beautiful night. We had a lot of companies there that were kind of like incognito, that had presence. One of which is, I won't name who they are, but they're basically the biggest IP distributor and incubator, Web2 IP distributor in Europe. They own virtually every studio in Europe, like animation studio. We're talking about TV, film, whatever, or like production house, except for Illumination and Micros, which are like the people behind like Minions. So they don't own that. Fox owns that, but they own like the rest, including some North American studios. And their representative that's sort of investigating Web3 was there at the party. I meet them. Actually, it's funny. I met them, and Natalie and Bart, that are in charge of our toys, sort of made the quick intro. And I talked to him, and these are actually the guys that had just released Miraculous Ladybug.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like $1 billion property. And he's like, hey, like, this is crazy. Congratulations. Let me see these booster packs. This is at the party. And he's looking at this, and man, like, look at that, because he could see all the characters on the screen. He's like, man, the brand loyalty is like, congratulations. And let's have a meeting tomorrow morning. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I kind of stopped drinking there. And I'm like, okay, I got to wake up tomorrow. And so we meet each other at Soho House in New York in the morning. And I'm, I'm dressed, whatever. I'm about to have this potentially really important meeting. And I sit down with him, and, we vibe. We're having coffee. He's like, yesterday was great. Show me these characters. Show me what you guys have. I take him through the whole kind of, we like to show almost everything. We haven't shown everything. So I went through those folders and kind of took him through like what we're thinking and all that stuff. And he's like, man, these are great. And he's like, okay, but he's like, but how are you, again, Web2, how are you tackling this whole kind of gambling aspect, and this whole kind of people want, are kind of like betting that the price goes up or whatever, is that what your tactic is? And I was like, look, the financialization of these collectibles is the same thing that happens for Pokemon cards, and it's the same thing that happens for Pop Vinyl, for every collectible out there. That is just a occupational hazard of a collectible, and the collectors and the fans can do whatever they want with those collectibles. But I was like, believe it or not, there are many, many people that really believe in what this can do for the space, and really love these characters just for the characters. It's not 100% the degen ethos of price go up and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, okay, like, that's cool. And like, tell me about these booster packs. And I'm showing him how it works. And as I'm showing him, there's a girl that walks up to us, and she interrupts the conversation, and she's, God bless her, she's like super shy. It's basically Karen from Magic Eden. I didn't even know that. But she comes up to us, and she's like, hey, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. And then she points at the booster pack. She's like, those things are like the most sought after thing in New York right now. And like, I don't want it, but I want to tell you, like, it's awesome. And I really like Claynosaurz, and it makes me smile. And these characters are adorable, and good job, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, she's like, you're Cab, right? And so this guy's sitting
beautiful timing,
dude,
by the way.
This guy's sitting next to, I could have paid her.
You see, I was going to say, you slip her 100 after
I could
that?
have paid her. And she was so apologetic. And I'm just there like, please don't apologize. Like, but so he's sitting next to me, and I had just told him that people love these characters, and they're excited about maybe the fact that we can help move the space forward and very much in a way that Luca's doing or whatever. And and she's there literally like confirming everything I've said, but she's also saying like everyone's looking for that in New York. And that conversation changed so fucking fast. Like it was just a different relationship from that point on. He's like, okay, like we need to set up this meeting. Maybe you guys will fly to France and we'll have like a meeting at the office and blah, 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 and whatever. So now we're in touch with them. We're not sure if we're going to pull the trigger right away, but the point is we're looking at potential co-producers at some point in time, an episodic when we're ready. So we are curating those relationships. But it's really exciting. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is there is a lot happening behind the scenes. Even when we're quiet, we're not, internally it is a friggin' hurricane.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. This is exciting. I mean,
licensing expo too, but I don't know if we have time to talk about that, but that's a different,
okay. It is currently,
it's completely up to you. It's like, I'll just,
no, we're okay. We got.
I'll delay.
There we go. I want to get into the licensing. I want to get into the licensing expo for a quick second because I do know that you have a dinner that you got to get to. So, what was that like? What was the goal of it? How did that go? Walk me through that real quick.
Very exciting, very humbling. So I went to Vegas for the licensing expo. I know that Luca was there. They had their Pudgy Penguins stand over there. Clayno's, we were there to kind of to gauge interest, to not have like a booth presence, but to learn and to be like, okay, what are the trends this year? Where is this all heading? What are the top companies doing? All that kind of stuff. And also, could there be interest from those companies? Very much like that animation studio I told you about. So I was meeting a few people, showing them. But it's so funny because I had the call again. It's amazing to have these advisors. I called Gaetano, our advisor, who was ex-president of Rovio, and I'm like, what do I do here? Like, am I aggressive in meeting people? And he's like, Nick, you want to meet any one of them? I'll put you in a room with them. Year one is not about that. He's like, you learn what the trends are. You just, look at what they're doing and look at what your product is doing and ask yourself, do you think it competes? Like, that's what you're here to do. And walk around, enjoy yourself. Don't be stressed about it. We'll talk to all these people. He's like, anyways, what happens at these licensing expos is like, you'll have like, Pokemon only talking with Hasbro because they already know each other. Like, really, you don't get to talk to them that much, right? And it really is. It's like a classic like boys club. It feels like, but my God, that expo is insane. First of all, it's fucking gigantic. It felt like it was like a 2x2 kilometer convention center. You walk in and there is like this like 100-foot Pikachu in the roof. It's insane, dude. The Pokemon booth is like next level peacocking. It's almost like they're there saying like, they look like the Apple store and they're like, yeah, like we have fuck you money, right? Like that's almost the message they're saying. It's like intimidating. Next to them is Hasbro, then it's Paramount and whatever. It just so happens that Liberty Square was also there, actually for his Web 2 kind of spiel. And I don't know how much of that I can say, but it is a big deal, and he has ties with Interscope, Universal, all that stuff. He is. I found out a lot about him, and I love the guy. I love what they're doing. He showed me a lot of things for what they're working with Liberty Square, and a lot of Web 2 things as well, and it's really interesting. But I was there with Liberty. We were walking around, and both of us, came to the same consensus where we're like, man, it's an echo chamber. Like Web3 right now, like at some point we will get there, but it's very easy to lose yourself in the moment and feel like, there's the greater calling and like, oh my God, like we're the best thing out there. But then you go to an expo that has Miraculous Ladybug that has just made like $1 billion, and they make the same amount on merchandising. You've got Cocomelon, you've got Oddbods, you've got Nintendo's there, you've got Pokemon is there, Pop Vinyl, all the character companies and character brands you can imagine that are something, some of which you may not have heard of, but still make like $500 million a year off merch. Like they're all there, and you're just there like, I got work to do.
I was gonna say it's a little humbling, huh?
I got work to do. And you're like, man, like now I got to figure out how to ninja into Web 2, but do it in a way that always kind of like soft circles back right into Web 3. And that's sort of like the concessions we've made as a company is like our birthright will always be Web 3. One of our biggest verticals will always be Web 3, but we have to be one of the players. It's our responsibility to sort of help guide and help shift the direction into what Web3 could actually be. I imagine a world in 3 years easily where digital collectibles is now accepted by society. It's a part of how we do things. When that time comes, I think that Web3 will be different from what it is today. And our goal is let's be a part of that. Let's come up with new emerging strategies, which might not always be appreciated right away, but it's where it needs to go. And we're talking about like, a holistic platform where this entire ecosystem makes sense, from content streams to digital ownership to collectibles to you name it and all of it. And you've got like the toys that have, of course, their digital experiences, but you've got other kind of like digital activations and unlocks that don't necessarily have to do with the toys, but their experiences, and they're based on the content, and then they go back into the toys, and then the toyification permeates like right back into the content, and then it's just like a circular thing. So I know it sounds like crazy talk, but that's sort of what in-house we're kind of strategizing. We have a lot of really important meetings coming up now with some really, really smart people, kind of like those like big 911 kind of type exciting meetings where it's like, what can we do with this, and where do we take the space, and where do we see this thing in 3 years, and where do we see this thing in 5 years? And this is our niche. The reality of it is our characters are amazing. I really believe that. I if there's one thing I really took from the licensing expo is like, we're going to be okay. Like, wow, like I can compete with Oddbots. I definitely compete with Paw Patrol and design, like that kind of stuff. But none of that is a given if you don't make the right moves or find a niche for yourself, because most of these projects I had a little thing that made them special. Pokemon, their whole thing was you have to collect them all, and I got to learn all the names of the characters. Paw Patrol, it's like, these little cute dogs that wear like rescue outfits, and like that's really special for a child. For us, our niche is, and I know Pudgy's has a lot of similarities. Our niche is a digital native character brand that taps into a lot of digital experiences, and there will come the day where all of that is very cohesive and there's an aha moment for everybody. But it is a really kind of like it's a kind of, I don't know how, if the bubble is the right word, but it's like, no, it's like it's a package, everything packaged into one, where if you can zoom out, you get it. But it's just all these different streams all working together in kind of a seamless fashion, being very tech forward, very experience forward, but always making sure that the content is super dope, because that is your lifeblood. Is like, people have to love these characters, they have to fall in love with these characters, and then everything else is history. And I think we'll get there. We'll get there soon.
Oh yeah. Yeah, dude, that's a perfect way to wrap this up. Yeah. This has been really cool. I mean, I love talking to you because, one, I could talk to you for 10 hours, but two, it's cool to hear.
Buy me dinner first.
Yeah, no kidding. But it's cool to get the behind the scenes of how these different meetings and how it all works and everything like that. So, dude, I appreciate you making time. I know you had a crazy busy week. I know you're exhausted. I know you got a dinner you got to go to right after this. But dude, thank you for stopping by.
Are we doing this at Breakpoint?
We might have to. So appreciate you doing this, and drop your socials. Where can people find you if they don't know who you are already?
Okay, you can find me at Cabanimation. It's the cheesiest name ever. Cabanimation. That's my socials.
There we go.
But Cab for short.
There we go. Well, dude, appreciate you stopping by. Go enjoy dinner, and we'll chat soon.
All right, man.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll chat soon. See you guys.